Well,
Uh,
let's get this started. So, welcome to NFA Talk, Derek. We're really pleased to have you on our program today to talk about your positions on firearms issues affecting Canadians. Uh, and we've got Jordan looking after us here, making sure everything's going to work, and Charles, who is our executive director. And as you know, I'm president of the National Firearms Association. So, you responded to our survey and we got very direct answers from you. They're, yes, 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 and a short blurb at the end. But really, what we want to do is flesh out those answers a little bit, learn a little bit more about you, and and find out really some more what your understanding is of some of these issues that affect Canadian firearms owners. And we really appreciate you taking the time, sequestered as all of us are during this interesting pandemic that we're all going through across the globe, and let's hear how it goes.
sure.
So this is the second in our series of 4 interviews of Conservative Party leadership candidates, and anyway, we'll start off with our questions. The first question that we had in our survey was, do you support the removal of non-victim, non-violent firearms offenses from the criminal code? Now, what this really goes to is about things that are administrative in nature, like the firearms license, which is really originally conceived as a tax measure, not as a means of control, and is morphed into something that's created a huge bureaucracy and has no proven benefit to preventing crime or stopping people who want to carry out evil acts from getting access to firearms. So we'd like to hear a little bit more from you about that.
Yeah, thank you for having me today, and I'm glad to be here. Yeah, I think this is if anything on your survey could be a no-brainer, this would be that question. I don't think there's any reason to criminally penalize people who 99 times out of 100 have simply made a mistake, either by memory or for other reasons. There's a lot easier ways to promote compliance with different. Things like do you have is your license has your license expired? I mean, a simple fine would be enough, I think. I don't think there's any reason to have a criminal code offense attached to these items. As you know, being charged criminally for something very simple like this can be a life changer. It can be a life ruiner, and there's no reason to have these types of things at all in the criminal code.
Certainly, and many provinces, not all provinces, but several provinces, British Columbia and Alberta were two, used to have a provincial firearms license, which you would go to the hardware store or the gas station, you pay your $5, and this was basically a tax measure, which is covered in our constitution under the division of powers. So, absolutely, how it got into the criminal code, it was liberal firearms legislation from the 1990s, which many have bought into. Thank you. Now, the next question was, do you support a repeal of firearms legislation which has not provided any evidence of benefit to public safety? And we've included in this the former bills C-71 of 2019, C-42, which has some things in it which are in fact increased gun control, and some other things which weren't so bad. That's from 2015. C-68 from 95. Tim Campbell's C-17 from 1991. And of course, the C-51 liberal legislation from 1977.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and this leads into the next question, which has to do with a systematic review of the laws that we have. And I think it's important that the firearms legislation that we do have is evidence based, and also what we know what the purpose for it is. And it seems like the underhanded purpose of many of these things is essentially restricting supply and restricting gun ownership as opposed to having a safety component. And I think that the government deserves to be honest with citizens about the intentions that it has when it comes to legislation.
Well, that's a very good answer, and I appreciate that because uh, we've seen successive waves of gun control. I think I've been through 6 of them myself that have increasingly confiscated people's property or limited your ability to use your own property without having the firearms owner, him or herself, actually do anything wrong. It just you increasingly get ratcheted into this system. So I appreciate that answer. Now, This next question is really somewhat parallel. These are probably real softballs, I guess, given your positions on this. Is do you support a complete review of the Firearms Act and related regulations with a view to protecting the right of firearms owners to enjoy the use of their property? And the strictures like the classification system, for example, really limit the ability of firearms owners to own their property. For example, if they're full auto collectors or 12.6 type prohibited handgun collectors, anything which is classified prohibited, has really stolen their property. And the whole classification system is liberal gun control from the 1970s. So, what's your position on that, Derek?
Yeah, so I think you're right. I think we need to have a complete review of firearms of the Firearms Act, and I think we have to be honest about what our intentions are. And if our intentions are public safety, then I think we need to be sure that we have good evidence to show that the laws that we have actually meet those aims. And if it is the intention of a certain government, like let's say the Liberal government, to decrease supply, decrease access, let's make those aims clear as well. But you know, to safety sounds pleasant, I think, to the average person, and so that's the guise that many of these laws are passed under. But it doesn't always pass muster when you look at evidence that deals with public safety.
Yes, and certainly evidence-based research does not support gun control. It really doesn't, and thank you for those comments. It's really something that we need to see a lot more transparency and honesty about from government. It hasn't been just liberals that have brought in some of this bad legislation. I mean, the Kim Campbell regime of the C-17 was one of the biggest gun grabs that we've experienced in terms of taking away people's rights, limiting magazine capacity, and several other aspects to it. So, uh, these particular types of laws, which have had no proven benefit, are really something we're not very happy with. Now, the next question, and we've touched on this a bit already, is the elimination of the firearms classification system so as to return the ability of firearms owners to freely use, buy, sell, trade, inherit, and pass on to heirs all of their firearms property. And as you're aware, you're a firearms owner. You know, we've got pretty good background on you about that. I think you're a trap shooter for one thing. You shoot trap, is that right?
I do. Yeah, I'm not super serious about it. Yeah, there you go. That's a good picture of my dad and I shooting trap. But yeah, we do it out in the backyard there at my place, and we get
Nice.
the whole family involved. So it's a lot of fun.
Oh, absolutely. I had my daughters out at the range recently as well, and it's a great family activity. So yeah, the passing on to heirs of property is one of those key things that it's a big deal for us, because the classification system was intended to stop the ownership of various types of firearms, so that you couldn't own these things anymore, and that would prevent people from passing them on, and thus ultimately eliminate these firearms from society. And as the list that gets longer and longer, has more and more targeting of firearms and firearms owners continues with successive government. So, what's your view on that, Derek? I'm all ears.
Yeah, so I mean, to me, the sort of classification system is uh, largely political. It's very arbitrary. There's no rhyme or reason really to it, and you don't know from one day to the next which guns will be classified, which guns will become prohibited, let alone restricted. So I think good laws are ones that are intelligible and where they can guide citizens to make decisions for forward-thinking decisions. And in this case, it's hard to know what guns will be safe next week, let alone next year. And I think it's important that. That laws are clear, and the current classification system that we have is anything but, in my view.
Well, thank you. I several years ago, I was waiting to meet the public safety minister when I was doing some lobbying for the National Firearms Association, and there were these two well-dressed gentlemen in the foyer, the lobby, if you like, who were waiting to see him as well. And we got to talking, as people waiting in waiting rooms will do. And it turned out they were from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and they were there with the firearms program, and they had lists of firearms that they wanted to pass into the prohibited category. And they said to me, they said, "Well, what are you here for?" And I said, "Well, I'm here to make sure they don't listen to you." We had a bit of a chuckle about that, but it wasn't really very funny. All right, the next one, property rights. This is a big bugbear, and it should be an easy one for any conservative candidate. Do you support the entrenchment of property rights into Canadian law? And what do property rights mean for you?
Yeah, so I do, and I think actually this is an issue that's much broader than gun owners. Obviously, anybody who owns real property, farmers, anybody who owns their own plot of land should be concerned about that. And as you know, we do not have the entrenchment of property rights in Canadian law. Unlike, for example, the United States. And it was something that was discussed, but not included in our last constitutional agreement there, where we in 1982, where we brought in the charter. So I think this is easier said than done. Obviously, I think to do this properly, we would have to have another constitutional convention, but certainly. Certainly something that I think should be on the list should that happen again.
And you're a lawyer as well, if I recall correctly. And I mean, one of the things that did put property rights into the forefront was Diefenbaker's Canadian Bill of Rights, but that's really lost a lot of force of law over time through lack of use more than anything else. A lot of people
Yeah.
haven't gone and said, "Well, the Bill of Rights says this,"
Yeah.
and that's probably unfortunate because I think, as we all know, you don't have rights that you don't claim. They
That's right.
they erode away. So
That's right.
if people were to be claiming that right a bit more, I think we would see a little bit more of it having force and effect. But it was specifically not put into the charter when we started to get this idea that we wanted a more Republican style constitution rather than the parliamentary constitution that we currently enjoy.
That's right. Well,
So
and on that point, it's interesting because a variety of things, and I won't elaborate on them, but a variety of things have been read into the charter that are not actually there. Yet property rights still languish to this day. So
yeah, and that's right. And I mean, our tradition in the parliamentary tradition is that rights don't need to be written down in the common law. Rights exist independent of constitutions.
yes,
But again, when people don't assert those rights, they become eroded in law and in precedent. I think that's how it works. If I remember my constitutional law classes from so many years ago.
yes, yeah. Well, that's the way it's supposed to work. But so thank you for pointing that out.
Great. Now, the other thing about the ownership and use of firearms for protection has a civil right. Now, there've been court cases about this, uh, and some of them seem to indicate that it's a little bit gray about whether you can use firearms for protection. And of course, you can, as long as such use is reasonable and necessary. But what's your position on that, and making sure it's clear for people? And what about using firearms for protection, not just of people, but also of property? Has used to be the case up until the 1977 legislation.
Yeah, to me, this is one of the most important, issues with firearms ownership. I think an individual's right to defend themselves ought to be sacrosanct. If there's anything that can take away from enjoyment in life, it's the feeling of vulnerability. It's the feeling of not being safe. And I think that the times that we're living in right now can show us very clearly that within a very short period of time, and I'm not trying to fearmonger or anything, but it's certainly possible that in short periods of time, government can it doesn't have all the answers, doesn't necessarily have the resources to protect everybody, and when basic systems shut down, which is possible at any time, it's important to make sure that we have the means to protect and defend ourselves. So I think that this point is very important. And if I were elected leader, I would be promoting some very bold self-defense laws that would make very clear. And just on that point, and being a lawyer, I'm aware, of course, that self-defense is always a quote unquote defense from a
Yes.
criminal charge. However, and that would be, I think, what someone who's maybe a liberal or someone who's who's in favor of, who would not be in favor of changing any laws. But the thing is that, yes, I suppose if you had to shoot someone in self-defense and you had to go and you're being charged and you're before a jury, you could probably win. But do we want to go that far? And what if you're just holding a gun? What if you're brandishing a gun to try and deter someone and you don't shoot them? Well, it's hard to use a self-defense defense when you didn't actually defend yourself. You didn't have to, thank God. And so I think we need to make it clear that the judicious use or threatening judiciously to use a firearm in self-defense is appropriate and lawful. And I
Yeah,
think that
reasonable and necessary in the circumstances.
that's right. That's
It's
right.
the old test. Yeah, and necessity, of course, is always a defense to a criminal charge.
That's right. That's right.
Not
But
always successfully, but
that's right. That's right. But and we don't always want to get there because I mean, being charged
that's right.
and being in the newspaper and it can change your life and it can ruin your life. So we want to make sure that we set the precedent up front that this is not a chargeable offense and hopefully prevent a lot of heartache to gun owners.
Absolutely. People who are ordinary Canadians who are trying to do the right thing, like their ancestors have done for over a century,
That's right.
basically.
That's right.
Yeah. Charlie, did you have anything you wanted to uh, say to Derek? You're on back on again.
Oh, can you see me now?
Yes, and we can hear you.
That's great. Okay. Well, I remember sitting down with Derek in Ottawa, and it was basically a meeting of the like minds. It was a very comfortable conversation. So I'm not surprised at his answers. It was very well received by me. I'm hopefully it's very well received by the audience as well too. Um, Derek is a gunny. He's a gun owner, right? And that comes through in the way he's talking. So thank you very much for completing our survey. You also, I think you're the second one to actually do the survey, got it on deadline. So congratulations and thank you for giving us the respect, our community that respect to bring that back. And thank you for coming on to NFA Talk and elaborating your values and principles on the subject. I thank you very much, sir.
So, Derek, uh, would you like to say a few things about yourself and your campaign, and just here's your opportunity to do a little bit of promotion and talk about deadlines for signing up and getting involved.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, that's right. So as of right now, anybody that's watching this program that's a Canadian citizen or actually a Canadian permanent resident even can participate in the leadership race. So to be able to do that, you have to become a member of the Conservative Party. It's very easy to do that. It costs $15. And you can do that. You can go to my website. So my website, I think you guys are going to post a link to this. But it's www.dereksloan.ca. If you become a member by May 15th, you can vote in the leadership race. So I just encourage you to sign up, get your friends and family to sign up. If you do want to support me, you can indicate that on my website. We will be taking donations a little bit later. Unfortunately, the leadership race is currently paused, so we can't process donations right now. But likely early May, the race will be on again. And we don't have any final dates. It was supposed to be June 27th, but it's a little bit up in the air with this pandemic. But I do encourage gun owners to get involved. And there's good candidates in this race. And obviously, I'm my favorite candidate, but I encourage your readers to do their research and get involved because if you don't have a seat at the table, no one listens to you. And this is a way now. Whoever wins this race it will very likely be prime minister at some point in the future,
We
and
can only hope.
we can only hope. So this is a way to get in at the ground floor. And once someone's name is on a sign, it's too late. This is the chance now for you to get involved and decide who will lead the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party isn't perfect, but it's by far the most gun-friendly party in Canada. And I just encourage your listeners to get involved and to promote a candidate that speaks to their needs and their concerns. And I hope that they've enjoyed our talk today.
Well, thank you very much, Derek. We really appreciate you coming on and speaking with us today and responding to our survey. All the very best in the leadership campaign, and stay safe and comfortable. And I hope your family's doing well out there. And all the very best to you.
Okay, thanks so much, and God bless everybody.
Thanks, Derek.
Thank you.
God bless you too. Bye-bye.
Thank you.